Have you ever had one of those moments, something so small, so simple, that it just completely changes everything? Well, we're about to dive into a story where a massive spiritual transformation didn't start with some grand revelation, but with something you'd find in a salad.
So that's a real quote from a man named Dr. Naoki Yamamoto. And I get it. It sounds like the setup to a joke, right? But it's not. It's actually the key to one of the most incredible conversion stories I think I've ever heard. So how on earth does a vegetable lead a Japanese professor to Islam? Let's get into it.
Okay, so before we can even get to the cucumber, we really need to understand the man who said this. Because this isn't just some quirky anecdote. It's a journey that spans cultures, continents, and some pretty profound shifts in belief.
So this is Dr. Naoki Yamamoto. He's a Japanese professor currently teaching over in Istanbul, Turkey. He grew up in a Christian family, though by his own account they weren't super religious, and then at just 19 years old, he converts to Islam. I mean, right away, you can tell his story is anything but typical.
Every story like this has a beginning, a starting point. And for a young Naoki Yamamoto, it was this really sincere, serious search for a spiritual home. And it began in a place you might not expect.
See, he wasn't just casually browsing religions. He was all in. He actually enrolled in Christian theology at his university because he wanted to become a priest. This was someone who was deeply, truly searching for meaning and a connection to the divine.
And that's really the big question here, isn't it? He had a map. He had a clear destination in mind. But his journey, well, it was about to take a very sharp, very unexpected turn. And it all started with a book.
So this is where things really start to shift. It wasn't a person who first introduced him to Islam. It was the written words of a Japanese Muslim scholar, words that introduced him to a concept that would just blow his mind. The book was all about Tawhid. This is the core Islamic idea of the absolute oneness of God. You have to imagine for Yamamoto, who's deep in Christian theology, this concept of a single, indivisible God, no partners, no children, it was a huge intellectual lightning bolt. It just offered a completely different way of seeing everything.
He was so moved by this book that he tried to contact the author, only to find out she had actually passed away. So instead, he sets up a meeting with her husband, who was also a professor. He walks into this little university cafe, probably expecting a deep academic chat, but what he got was something else entirely.
Can you even imagine that? You're a young student, you're meeting this respected professor for the first time, and the moment he walks in, he just starts crying. Yamamoto was, as you can imagine, completely stunned. He had no idea what was going on. The professor was just overcome with grief for his late wife. And through his tears, the professor explains. He tells him that Yamamoto's email about the book reminded him of a saying from the Prophet Muhammad, a hadith, which says a person's good deeds continue even after they die in 3 specific ways. And right there, he saw it. His wife wasn't really gone. Her beneficial knowledge was living on through her book, and the proof was sitting right in front of him, a young Japanese student whose life it was changing. Well, that encounter lit a fire in him. This wasn't just an academic interest anymore. To really get it, he knew he had to experience it firsthand. So he packed his bags and went from the quiet, structured world of a Japanese university to the beautiful chaos of Cairo. His main goal was to learn Arabic, but he happened to land there right at the start of Ramadan, the Islamic holy month of fasting. And it was here, on the streets of Cairo, that he was about to see faith not as a theory in a book, but as a real, living, breathing thing.
And this is it. This is the moment that defines the entire story. Forget everything you think you know about grand sermons in huge mosques or lectures from famous scholars. The most powerful lesson Yamamoto ever learned came from a humble doorman and a single cucumber. This move to Cairo really highlighted a massive culture clash for him. He came from Japan, a society he saw as very individualistic, where the instinct is often to, keep to yourself. But in Cairo, especially during Ramadan, he saw a totally different vibe. It was all about community, about radical generosity. So one evening, he's coming back to his apartment, and he sees the building's doorman breaking his fast. And look, this was not some big feast. The man was poor. All he had to eat for the entire day was 1 cucumber. And the doorman sees Yamamoto, a total stranger, a non-Muslim student from Japan, and without a moment's hesitation, he holds out his only piece of food and offers it to him. Not half of it, the whole thing. Just this pure, unbelievable act of selflessness from a man who had next to nothing. And for Yamamoto, that single act was the sermon. The doorman wasn't trying to preach to him or quote scripture. He was just living his faith.
It was this silent, incredibly powerful demonstration that what you believe has to show up in how you act. It was the proof he'd been looking for. The effect was immediate. I mean, absolutely immediate. This wasn't a decision that took months or years. After seeing that one simple, practical act of faith, it took Naoki Yamamoto just a couple of days to walk into a mosque and formally become a Muslim.
But his story doesn't end there. In a lot of ways, that's where it really begins. Because that lesson from the doorman, the lesson of the cucumber, it became the lens through which he saw everything, not just his new faith, but also the society he came from.
He looks back at Japan now and sees its biggest wound as this deep, profound loneliness. And this isn't just a feeling. It tragically contributes to a staggering number of suicides every single year, around 20,000. For him, the doorman's simple act of connection wasn't just a nice thing to do. It's the antidote to a very modern crisis.
And it's interesting, when you ask him what he admires most about the Prophet Muhammad, he points to this quality called istiqamat, which is this idea of steadfastness, of perseverance. It's the strength to keep going, to keep acting on your faith, especially when it's hard and no one's watching, just like that doorman.
And this quote just brings it all together, doesn't it? Yamamoto's whole point is that people, especially in a culture like Japan's, they aren't convinced by big speeches or online personalities. They're moved by action. They want to see the proof. The doorman didn't need a YouTube channel. His proof was a cucumber.
And that really leaves us with a huge question to think about, doesn't it? Dr. Yamamoto's story shows us that sometimes the most profound expressions of what we believe are found in the smallest, simplest actions. So it's worth asking ourselves, no matter what we believe, if our actions are our only sermon, what exactly are we preaching to the world?